mountains of central British Columbia to you listening around the world. This, my friends, is Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott, sitting in the captain's chair of SOR headquarters. We welcome you to tonight's show on our terrestrial affiliates around North America and digitally on TalkStream Live and Revolution Radio, along with KPNL digital radio as well. If you want to take a listen to our archives, they are free for you at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Tonight's show is brought to you by Chive Charities. Help make the world 10% happier by visiting Chive Charities today. You can find them on our website. I'm telling you, we have an amazing guest for you tonight. When it comes to legends and legendary status, there are very few in the UFO field that reach the level of Dr. Bruce Maccabee. Now, this is a gentleman who has been studying UFOs since the early 1960s. He has looked at all cases from Kenneth Arnold back in 1947 right up to the current cases that we see going on right now with the United States military. Now, this is a gentleman who has his doctorate in physics. He has been a leader in NICAP, a leader in MUFON, and he has also worked with the United States Navy for 36 years. When we're looking at smart people in this field, Dr. Bruce Maccabee is where it's at. This is one of the leaders, and, you know, for a long time, people call him a part of the Aviary, that legendary group of scientists looking into this phenomena. We're going to learn a lot tonight, and let's just get to it. Let's just do it. Dr. Bruce Maccabee, welcome to Spaced Out Radio. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, and thanks for inviting me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. My friend, when you started way back and you decided that you wanted to be a scientist, did you ever think it would lead to UFOs?
No, never. I decided I wanted to be a scientist, I guess, when I was 8 or 9 or 10 or something like that. I didn't get into UFOs in any big way until the late 60s, early 70s. So there was a big gap there between being a scientist and being a ufologist. But when I had a lot of science as a background and then started reading explanations that skeptics were offering for UFO sightings, I could see how many of these explanations just didn't make any physical sense. And that attracted my interest. Why were they trying to explain things away with garbage explanations? And that sort of led me to doing my own investigation starting in the early 1970s.
How did you get into the whole UFO flap and the phenomena? Because you have been a prominent voice for decades in this field.
Well, as I sort of alluded to, I didn't get interested really in the UFO subject until the late 60s. But let me give a little bit of history. June 24th, 1947, when Kenneth Arnold, flying in an airplane not far from Mount Rainier in the state of Washington, saw 9 semicircular things go past at a speed he calculated of 1,700 miles an hour. That sort of began the subject, and there was a big flap of sightings in 1947 that then brought in the Air Force and intelligence organizations that apparently wanted to cover the subject up. But anyway, there was a lot of interest on the part of people, but I was only like 5 or 6 years old at the time, so I didn't pay any attention. There were sightings in the early 1950s, in particular the summer of 1952, when the subject made it into the newspapers. And I sort of vaguely remember reading about it at that time, but being only 10 years old, there wasn't anything I could do about it. I did read a book by Captain Edward J. Ruppelt, the first director of Project Blue Book. He was an Air Force captain. And if you read his book, at the end of the book, you sort of get the impression he was sitting on the fence and it would take a feather to knock him over onto the ET side, but he didn't come out and say that directly. anyway, I didn't pay much attention to the subject until the late 60s when there were sightings again. There were so many that the general population decided that the Air Force was not providing good enough explanations to convince anybody. And so the Air Force had a project going called Project Blue Book, and the Congress directed the Air Force to start an independent investigation, independent of Project Blue Book, and try to come up with some good answers as to what UFOs were. At least that's ostensibly what they were supposed to do. Well, one wonders what they were supposed to do after reading this whole report that they generated, because it was the general report was a downer, except that there were a few places where they said they couldn't explain things. And in fact, out of about 90 cases, the Connon report, the Connon study at the University of Colorado, about 90 cases they looked at, about 30 of them they couldn't explain. You would expect they would have explained them all if there was nothing to it. Well, anyway, in 1969, the Air Force closed Project Blue Book, and there was a sort of a general feeling that that was the end of UFOs. Wouldn't be around anymore. There was nothing to all the sightings that had occurred. It was all a big mistake, misidentifications, hoaxes, and the delusions and so on of witnesses. And then in 1973, in the late summer of 1973, there was a big flap that occurred. It was like, we're back. UFOs were all over the place. A couple of major sightings were a sighting where some Army guys in a helicopter were in a helicopter when an object flew by and lifted the helicopter up, even though the captain operating the helicopter had a lever pushed that would make the helicopter go down. That was the coin helicopter case. And there was the two guys who were abducted while fishing on the bank of the Pascagoula River. One of them, the younger one of the two men, has in the last couple of years published a couple of books about his experience. But anyway, it was like UFOs hadn't gone away after all. They're back in 1973, and so I decided to see what I could do, if anything, about studying the subject. And that's where I sort of began, right there. And I began by investigating some sightings that nobody had ever heard of, and some sightings that people had heard of. And in particular, one sighting that the Connon report, the analyst in the Connon report had said that there was one sighting which he thought might be real. That was William Hartman, the photographic analyst, and he studied the so-called McMinnville photographs taken by the Paul Trent. The thing about the McMinnville photos by Paul Trent is the object that he depicted is so clear. It's either the real thing, a UFO, somebody else's aircraft, or else it's a hoax. There's no halfway point. And although the photo analyst in the Connon report had said that, in his opinion, it might be real, no scientist that I was aware of took up the challenge, you might say, to prove those photos were hoaxes. It wasn't until 1974 when I got interested in the Trent case that I began analyzing it, and my analysis lasted several years.
Right.
I managed to hold the original photos, the original negatives, and I spent a lot of time studying them. And ultimately, after I put together all the circumstantial evidence, the story behind the photos, and the photos themselves, I concluded it was real. I guess that's what sort of put me on the map, on the UFO map.
Right. Dr. Maccabee, do you remember who introduced you to UFOs? I mean, maybe I missed it in what you were saying, but obviously there was a point where somebody or one of your colleagues dragged you in to get your opinion on this. Do you remember how that happened?
Not really. I was going to school to get my PhD in physics at American University in Washington, D.C. at the time. And everybody was talking about UFOs in 1967, 68 as the government-directed study at the University of Colorado was going on. And for a period of time, it was allowable to talk about UFOs flying saucers without having a bag over your head. And if there was any person who got me interested, I guess, I went to a lecture at American University given by two gentlemen from the National Investigating Committee on Aerial Phenomena, NICAP, which used to be headquartered in Washington, D.C., and at the time was the largest civilian investigating organization, NICAP. And they said, after the lecture was over, parting shot, you might say, they said, oh, by the way, we can use any volunteer help at our office. Our main office is downtown in Washington, D.C., not too far from where I was staying at school. And I thought, well, if I'm going to find out about what's going on, I guess you got to jump in and see what happens. So I went down to the office, and now NICAP was, as I said, the largest civilian organization at the time. It was mentioned in all the books on UFOs that had been published up to that point, or most of the books of those. So I expected to find a large office filled with lots of secretaries and scientists running around and doing whatever they're doing, analyzing sightings and so on. So I got on a bus and I went to the center into Washington, got out of New Hampshire Avenue, and found the building that this office was in. Turned out to be a broken down row house, and they were in the second floor of this row house. And I went up the stairs. There was a single naked light bulb at the top of the stairs to light the way up. And then I opened the door into what I expected to be a big office. Turned out it was a broken down building with a broken down office and a broken down old lady running the whole show. She was a very intelligent woman, but it was certainly nothing like what I expected. Well, the only thing they had that was unique was they had these filing cabinets stuffed with some 10 to 12,000 sightings. And so I thought, well, at the very least, I can get to read some stuff while I'm here. And I actually helped Isabel Davis, the secretary, the old lady I was talking about. I helped her do some clerical work and so on. And that's how I got involved. I met the members of the local NICAP subcommittee. NICAP had what they called subcommittees scattered throughout the world, and the subcommittees were scientists and interested people who actually did the investigations, and then they would send their reports to the NICAP headquarters to be filed in the master file of NICAP. And so anyway,
when we look at the history that you have had with UFOs, I know this is a question you have been asked probably about 1 million to 2 million times, but do you believe that UFOs are not only here, but they are from another planet? Because in today's ufology, which what we see with the TTSA and a lot of these other groups, we're not allowed to say aliens and UFOs anymore. We're not allowed to combine the two. Everything is UAP.
Yeah, well, that's like throwing a small thin sheet over a pile of something you don't want to look at anymore. First of all, let me say that I am a partisan of the ET explanation. Not because I can prove it, but it's sort of like the simplest thing. It basically says creatures of some sort, could be us, manage to travel from one place to another, and they win because they have gotten here before we get there. They're flying around doing whatever they want to do, but they are solid craft with solid creatures inside and so on. And I choose that because that's the simplest, as I see, the simplest possible explanation. After all, I could do that myself if I wanted to take the time to travel to the nearest star. I could do that. I know how I could do it. It'd take a heck of a long time to do it, but I know how I could do it. If somebody says, "Oh, they're time travelers," or they're space travelers, they warp space, or they are in another dimension or something, I don't know how to do any of those things. I know what 3 dimensions is like, but four dimensions with time, but I can't imagine a situation where you have 4 space dimensions in time. And I have the same problem with people talking about warping space to go from large distances in short times. That may be true. Maybe we think you can pack yourself in a spaceship and go zipping off towards some other planet. And if you can go fast enough, you may be able to make it in a short time compared to your clock. The clock traveling with you might be a couple of years of travel time, whereas somebody back on Earth would think it's going to take you a long time to go there. But the point is that I don't know how to do that. Can I figure out some way to collect enough energy into one small volume to warp space around that volume, or is that just a pipe dream? So anyway, I'm on the ET side at the present time.
In all of your research and everything that you have done, have you ever come close to a close encounter of the third kind or higher?
Me personally?
Yes.
No. I did have a sighting of a ring of lights appearing in the sky in Gulf Breeze, Florida, back in September of 1991. For a period of time from 1987, for several years, Gulf Breeze was sort of the UFO center of the world. And I was there in September of 1991 when a ring of lights appeared up in the sky. That's one little piece of a very large story. But I was prepared to debunk this thing as a manufactured ring of lights on a framework supported by balloons or something like that. In other words, a hoax. I was prepared to call this a hoax, but when I saw the thing, I thought it stretched the hoax hypothesis beyond the breaking point. So I consider that to be a UFO experience at the present, as I understand it at the present time. But I haven't had anything else that...
Do you feel a little ripped off?
What?
Do you feel a little ripped off? You didn't get to meet some aliens?
Well, I hadn't really thought about the rip-off aspect of it. I don't know if I deserve better or not. Maybe it's better that I stay clean. That way people can't say that I'm nuts. And where they might say anybody who is a witness can't be an investigator of his own case or something like that.
When you look at the entire phenomena over the 60, 70 years that you have been looking into this, does anything shock you any more regarding this subject?
Well, I haven't thought much about the shock aspect. I suppose seeing something that you know can't be true, and I've seen some things like that. It's shocking, but it didn't scare me or anything. I don't know what you mean by shock, I guess.
Well, let's just say, how can we look at this? You have dealt with a lot of the big-name scientists. You have dealt with government officials. You've dealt with the military on this topic. Has anything just kind of made you raise your eyebrows and say, why don't we just come out with this? Why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we being leaders instead of keeping secrets?
I haven't had big, long discussions with military people and so on as to why we don't just admit something's going on. I have sort of stayed in the area of the subject which has to do with deciding whether or not any of these things are real. The thing that got me interested was the garbage explanations. Like I mentioned Kenneth Arnold as being the first sighting that made it into the newspapers, and that's his sighting in June 24th, 1947, about which I have written a whole book about that one sighting. his sighting was what the term flying saucer was invented to describe what he saw. And
when you look back on your careers, we got about 2.5 minutes before we have to go to break here. Is there anything that you haven't accomplished yet with the UFO field that you would like to see accomplished?
Well, I guess I never succeeded in convincing the skeptics, in spite of all the effort I put into studying sightings. As I was saying, my goal in studying sightings has been to find one or more that absolutely cannot be explained in any other way than that something unusual is going on. We're getting closer to that situation now, thanks to the Navy releasing the Tic Tac sightings and stuff. The videos that have recently been released, they have provided a firmer foundation than we've had before. Although I would argue that we have had many times sightings that would by themselves prove that something was going on. But the skeptics have always managed to come up with some way of explaining it, even if it just basically is to ignore the data.
Okay, so when you see a group, with about a minute to go here, when you see a group like the To the Stars Academy taking credit for the United States Navy videos, how does that make you feel as a researcher?
Well, that's up to the guys who took the videos, I guess, as to whether or not they should be angry with the TTSA people. The thing that bugs me about the TTSA people is they talk about being able to determine when you got a real UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon, by comparing with the so-called observables, what they call observable phenomena associated with these flying craft, ability to accelerate at a huge rate, travel at extremely high speeds, virtually disappear, not have any control, any visible means of propulsion or control of travel, very jerky travel, and they go along a certain direction and then suddenly make a 90-degree turn.
It's interesting.
What bugs me about that is that those observables were also mentioned way back in 1947. So I asked the question, what have we learned in the last 70 years?
Hold that thought right there, because we are going to go to break here at the bottom of the hour. Legendary UFO researcher and scientist Dr. Bruce Maccabee continues right after this on Spaced Out Radio. This is awesome. This is awesome. I'm just pumped right up for this. You having fun yet?
No, I'm having fun. I'll be having fun just as long as I can stay away from the virus.
Yeah, me too. Me too. That's why I eat a lot of hot sauce. The capsicum in the pepper heat helps clean the lungs.
Eat your zinc. ABCD zinc.
Yes. That too. So where are you? You're in Ohio, right?
Yes.
I've only been to Ohio once. Once.
Uh-huh.
And that
was a pleasant visit.
You know what? It was kind of cool. Some friends of mine and I, I've been twice, pardon me. I was visiting friends in Pittsburgh, and we drove up to Cleveland to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Uh-huh.
That was amazing. And what really bothered me was as we were driving back, we drove past the baseball stadium, and the Indians were playing the New York Yankees, and I love the New York Yankees, but my friends wouldn't stop for 3 hours so we could catch the game. That kind of bugged me. But the second time was a couple of years later. I went back there, and with some other friends, we went on I'm what they call there's this hobby called geocaching, which is like a satellite GPS scavenger hunt game. And so we went geocaching out in that tri-state area there with Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. And that is just beautiful country in there. Beautiful country.
The mountains aren't as big as they are in British Columbia.
No, true. But it's also the first place I ever saw fireflies.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I'd never seen them before. I felt like an idiot in my friend's backyard asking him what all this green flashing stuff was, and he had no clue what I was talking about.
UFOs all over the place.
They were everywhere. They were everywhere.
Yeah, when you're on a good year, when you're at the right time of the good year, like 10, 11, 12 o'clock, the air will be filled with flashing lights traveling all over the place.
It's also the first place I ever heard a wild turkey.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So, didn't see them. Saw one in the middle of the highway when I went to a paranormal conference in, goodness. I always forget the name. It's in Massachusetts. The Pilgrims landed there.
Plymouth.
No, not Plymouth. Provincetown. Provincetown.
Oh, Provincetown.
Yes. Uh-huh. So.
Is that out on the hook?
Yes. Right on the hook there.
Yeah, okay.
By Martha's, is that Martha's Vineyard? Is that?
Martha's Vineyard is an island that's just south of the hook.
Yeah. Yeah, that's gorgeous area. Imagine my freak out session when the worst movie ever that I've ever seen scared the daylights out of me is Jaws, and you walk up near the water of Provincetown, and there's giant billboards saying, be careful of the water. We do have great white sharks in this area. And all I'm thinking of is, if I see a fin, I am running. I don't care. I'm getting off of this place. It's just not cool. It's not cool.
Well, I have a memory of the one time I was out on the hook south of Boston, and then around on the hook of Massachusetts. There it was summer of 1990, I think it was. The summer that the Soviet Union collapsed.
Yeah.
It was also the summer that Hurricane Bob. Now, we had planned our vacation. We were going to go and visit. We're going to go and visit Bud Hopkins, who had a house in Truro,
right,
which is out near Provincetown. So anyway, we had a motel rented right on the south shore of that hook. I forgot what you call it, the hook area itself, but.
Hold on to that story, my friend. We're back in 2 seconds here. Hold on. Second half hour of Spaced Out Radio is now underway. My name is Dave Scott, sitting in the captain's chair of SOR headquarters. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us tonight. Really appreciate it. I want to remind you that if you miss portions of this show or others, check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter @Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. We continue our UFO chat tonight with legendary researcher Dr. Bruce Maccabee, and if you want to check out a lot of his work, go to his website, brumac.mysite.com. That's B-R-U-M-A-C, brumac.mysite.com. Mr. Maccabee, welcome back.
Thank you. And my site is spelled M-Y-S-I-T-E.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I want to ask you right off the bat, one of the terms of where I learned your name as a budding journalist in this field is through the Aviary. Did you ever know you were part of the Aviary?
By acclamation, I was part of the Aviary. I didn't ask to be part of the Aviary. But the Aviary has got a big mythology associated with it. It sort of grew by itself. People who are interested in pursuing government cover-up very often got Aviary names if they interacted at all with Bill Moore and Jamie Chandray. The whole idea began in the early 1980s when, first of all, the publication of the book Roswell Incident alerted the cover-up guys that somebody was on the right track saying that Roswell was a real crash. And not too soon after that book came out in the fall of 1980, Bill Moore, according to the story as I recall it, Bill Moore got a phone call from a secret agent. Many years we find out that this is a guy by the name of Richard Doty. And so anyway, Bill gets this phone call, and Bill told me that the caller told Bill that Bill was the only person who was barking up the right tree, you might say. And from then on, Bill got documents that just sort of ended up coming in his mailbox one way or another. He had, at that time in the early 80s, two primary undercover sources of information, and he gave them names, Condor and Falcon. And that was the genesis of the Aviary. Condor and Falcon soon added on to them some other bird names of people who were supplying information to Bill Moore. I managed to do some work on the testimony of a guy by the name of Hawk, which is on my website. It's very interesting. If Hawk's testimony could be proven, that would have blown the cover-up right by itself. But anyway, various people who provided Bill and Jamie with information became birds one way or another. And pretty soon there were several dozen birds, I guess, in this aviary. No, there was never any meeting of the aviary. People think of the aviary as a working group of people, but the work that was done by the aviary people was basically whatever they were doing at the time. There wasn't any, at least I was not aware of any big coordinated effort on the part of so-called aviary members. It became really more of a laughing stock of the subject than an important group of people.
Did you think they could have given you a better name than Seagull?
Well, that was the natural. I was working for the Navy, so obviously that's where I got the name Seagull. I remember Bill telling me, laughing at you, saying, you rattled off a couple of other people with bird names, and he said, and of course you're Seagull.
Well, that makes sense, working for the Navy and everything. But, a lot of people look at the Aviary as almost a super group, not only of scientists, but of researchers who really knew the truth behind ufology. You had, Rick Doty, who was a confirmed disinformation agent. You have other scientists, whether it's Hal Puthoff or, Jacques Vallée in there, who have, made a career off of discovering and understanding and learning about the phenomena. When you look at this entire board of the Aviary, I mean, this really is a who's who of very powerful people who potentially know the truth of what is going on.
They may know some of it, but the aviary aspect is really tending towards researching the government cover-up. Once the Roswell case had been established, then the problem was to get confirming information. And you couldn't do that by walking into wherever they kept the material and grabbing some and taking it out. And if you could do that, then you would have had absolute proof that there was something going on. Instead, people who really know the history know that the Roswell case had no impact at all on ufology until 1979. It happened in July of 1947, a couple of weeks after Kenneth Arnold's sighting, and just at the end of this peak of sighting, the number of sightings per unit time coming into the published in the papers primarily, became a big peak. If you plotted the number of sightings per unit time, reached a big peak in the early July, and then started to taper off. And then along came the Roswell case, which started off with a bang. As you may remember, there was a newspaper story that got published in the afternoon of July 8th, I guess it was, whatever the day was. And then the next day, there was the claim that it was a weather balloon, which always sounded fishy. Even the Washington Post said that sounded a little bit strange to them, that a top flight Air Force intelligence officer, Jesse Marcel, couldn't tell when he was picking up a balloon, couldn't distinguish a balloon from an extraterrestrial craft. But anyway, General Roger Ramey claimed that it was a balloon in the Air Force, and as the news media was happy to accept that as an explanation, as unlikely as it seemed. And you never heard about Roswell again until 1978, late 78, I think it was, when Stanton Friedman, rest in peace, when Stanton Friedman heard about this guy, Jesse Marcel, and his experience carrying with a craft, the pieces of a craft. And that was in late December 1978. In 1979 and half of 1980 was devoted to investigating by Bill Moore and Stan Friedman and a few others, investigating this story of a crash. And of course, their main witness was Jesse Marcel Sr.,
I got to ask you, in regards to Roswell, how come we don't hear so much about St. Augustine? We believe, according to Stanton Friedman, God rest his soul, that both of these crashes happened at nearly the exact same time, leading some, including Dr. Friedman, to believe that there may have been a mid-air collision between these two craft.
Yeah, well, if you track down the reason there's not so much stuff on a St. Augustine crash, if there was one, is that there wasn't a totally believable first-hand witness to the subject. There was notes in a notebook by a guy, I can't think of his name now, who was in the area at the time, in the plains of St. Augustine at the time, but there was no witness testimony comparable to what they were able to get out of the people who were at the Roswell Army Base at the time. They started off with Jesse Marcel, and he told his story, and then Bill Moore and Chandray did all the investigation they could to confirm or deny what Jesse Marcel was saying, and they basically confirmed it. They found other witness support, people like Lydia Sleppy, who was operating a teletype machine, typing out a message to a reporter on the crash, and all of a sudden the machine stopped working, and then it started typing a message back to her saying, don't continue this message. And the radio station where this teletype was subsequently told that if you say anything about this, you'll lose your license. Bottom line is that there was Jesse Marcel and a string of other witnesses, and there wasn't any comparable testimony from the San Augustine estimated guessed at crash.
Okay, so do you believe that scenario?
The plains of San Augustine are something like 100 miles west of the Roswell crash area. Maybe not 100, but somewhere, something like that. And as I said, there wasn't any clear witness to it, as I recall.
Well, just Gerald Anderson, who was 5 years old at the time. I mean, that's all we got.
Right. Well, that's what I mean. There wasn't any clear witness.
Right. When you look at everything regarding crash sites and UFOs, do you believe that there is a hidden facility, whether it's at Area 51, Wright-Patterson, or somewhere else of that nature, where we are storing these craft?
Well, I don't know how many crafts we're talking about, but we got at least one at Roswell. And well, I've always said if there's any hardware available, it's bottled up so tightly that most people don't know it even exists. And there's no point in. Oh, there may be now. Things have changed because of this Navy stuff we mentioned earlier. But up to the last couple of years, there's been no real reason to try to beat your head against the wall getting information out of the government that's going to prove that UFOs are real and they're crashed discs and so on. Because anybody who knows about it is just going to deny it, and the chances are that the investigators have not even found anybody who knows about it. In other words, it's at least a second level cover-up.
What, in your opinion, is being covered up?
Well, the most general term would be UFO reality, I guess. What I've called non-human intelligence is driving around in their hot rods, capable of instantaneously acceleration, traveling from 0 to 60 miles an hour in a microsecond or something like that. You may remember 20 or 30 years ago when the VW Bug with its 30 horsepower engine would go from 0 to 60 in 5 minutes or something like that. But these craft will go from 0 to 60 in a small fraction of a second. Anyway.
Dr. Maccabee, when you were, finally retired and able to focus on this full time, what changed in the way you were able to research this? Did it become harder for you to find information, or were your contacts still quite open in discussing the subject of this phenomena?
Well, contacts were open. I really haven't done as many sighting investigations since I retired from the Navy as I did in the previous years. But there always is a problem of collecting witness data, the testimony from the witness, and analyzing that. And then if there's any hardware to go along with it, photographs, or special effects like magnetic effects. It always comes down to the core problem is in the circumstantial evidence. The story behind what's going on. Like in the Trent photos that I mentioned earlier, that are clearly either a hoax or a real thing. I spent hours. I think I added up to like 2 days worth of 24 hours worth of time talking to her on the phone over a period of 4 or so years to get a story that I believed was consistent and believable. Their story about how this thing went by their house, and Paul Trent ran and got his camera and took 2 pictures of it. There have been people trying to debunk this case ever since it was published by the Condon study in 1968. I guess the bottom line is it's always difficult if you're going to try to do an in-depth investigation. How much time it takes is going to be determined by how much information there is available. I guess the second most information-rich case was the New Zealand sightings of December 31st, 1978, which took me several years to analyze all various parts of multiple witnesses, color movie film, radar, all sorts of stuff that had to be put together into a big long story in order to understand what was going on. But clearly the most complicated situation I ever had to deal with was Gulf breeze, starting in November 11th. We're coming up on the 11th of November, very shortly, the anniversary of the beginning of the Gulf breeze, November 11th, 1987. And sightings that occurred with Ed Walters' photographs, but also a couple of hundred other witnesses. By the time you got through to about, the phenomenon there lasted about 10 years, peaking in 1988 and 1989 and 1990. And that required hours of interviews and tons of photographic analysis. That was probably the most difficult sighting to handle. But then more recently, much more recently, I did an analysis of the Mexican Air Force case, 2004, March 2004. Mexican Air Force got infrared video of lights of some sort as it was flying over the Yucatan Peninsula. And I was told at the time by the people who were collecting the information for me that this was backed by the Mexican Air Force. It was all, the information was there. Basically, they had to translate a tape recording that was running during the time that the plane was flying around this path, first heading northwestward, and then making almost right angle turn to head due east. And it was while they were traveling due east after that turn that they started getting bright lights in an particular arrangement of bright lights off in the horizon. And I had to have the audio tape translated and analyze the infrared videotape, somewhat similar to the Tic Tac case in the sightings that they had on the Princeton. I should say it was the F-18 that had the infrared images. This Mexican case I was talking about, the Mexican Air Force, they were looking for drug runners and so on, and happened to see their infrared viewing system, forward-looking infrared FLIR, picking up bright lights that seemed to be pacing them, traveling right along with them. And you very often see this very short clip of these lights traveling along, and whenever some company is putting together a UFO show with video included in the UFO show, they may include these lights, which, in my opinion, are flares on top of a oil burn-off flares in an oil field in the well, I can't think of the name of the town right off, but anyway, oil flares about 100 miles away. And that took an awful long time of investigation and come up with a probable explanation for it, so it was sort of disappointing.
We have just under 2 minutes here before we have to go to break at the top of the hour. Dr. Bruce Maccabee is our guest tonight. I want to quickly ask you about, your involvement with the Aviary, your involvement in researching a lot of these. You were also known as someone who was a consultant expert on leaked or disinformational UFO cases or topics or conspiracies. How did you go about debunking a lot of these cases as to whether or not they happened or not?
Well, I didn't know that I was known for a lot of debunking. I'm not sure exactly what you're asking. I was the first person to get the FBI file in 1977, and I subsequently combined that with the CIA file that was released in 1978, the end of 1978, and in the late 1990s, I wrote a book called the FBI UFO Connection, and that included CIA stuff in it. I added chapters to it and republished it in 2014 as the FBI CIA UFO Connection, presently available at Amazon. And that sort of got me into investigating government cover-ups, but I never spent a lot of time on covering up stuff or trying to dig through cover-ups, just as I never spent a lot of time trying to theorize about what UFOs are. Right. I spent my time in investigation, and that took up a lot of time, especially in some particular cases.
Well, I believe that. And when we come back from the break, Dr. Maccabee, I want to get into your theories of what is coming from the U.S. Navy. You've recently written another study regarding this called the NHI. I want to get into this with you. Dr. Bruce Maccabee is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. His website, brumac.mysite.com. Check it on out. It's a lifetime of research on this website. You'll be thoroughly impressed. More Spaced Out Radio next in Hour 2. All right, Doc, I'm just going to quickly run my dogs outside. I'll be right back. We got 6 minutes, okay?
Okay.
For thaw.
Be right
Come
back.
Tune in to SOR where you can hear me rock out with Little Brother Is Watching, the official theme song of Spaced Out Radio. And then come on over to bumblefoot.com where you can find out about my tour schedule, my music, and everything else. Bumblefoot.com keeps you up to date on what I'm doing and the best way to stay in touch with my music and music camps. Sign up for my newsletter at bumblefoot.com and remember, Little Brother Is Watching.
The SOR Vault is open for business, and we have some cool swag for you to pick up. All you have to do is head over to our website and click on the SOR Vault. You have a variety of cool logos to choose from, and put them on anything you want. T-shirts, hoodies, hats, coffee mugs, you name it, we can get it to you. So do your shopping by supporting the store you love. Get your Spaced Out Radio swag at the SOR Vault today.
For the price of 1 cup of coffee a month, you can become an SOR Space Traveler. The Space Travelers Club is a place where you can interact with other listeners, either live during the show or on our great forum. We want your stories, pictures, comments, and ideas. You'll get live video streams, exclusive content, and be a part of our newsletter. Stay in touch with everything SOR. The Space Travelers Club is just $5 a month at spacedoutradio.com.
We are scouring the world for the most intriguing stories of your day. Take the time to read up on the SOR Newswire, where our team, led by Captain Shirk, will deliver to you some of the best paranormal and supernatural news, along with some stories that will blow your mind from the weird to the wacky. It's the news outside the news that piques interest, and that's what we're looking to deliver to you. The SOR Newswire, only at spacedoutradio.com.
I'm feeling a little spicy tonight. What to do? What to do?
Why not get Bumblefuck?
4 million Scoville units of pure hard rock. Bumblefoot hot sauces come in 3 flavors. The burning Bumble. Tone it down a bit with Bumblicious and throw the sauce on everything.
Spice it up. Bumble me, baby. Bumblefoot hot sauce. Get it today at kajans.com.
The party is always on at the Moose Vancouver. The Moose Vancouver is where you want to be when visiting Canada's West Coast. Open until 2 a.m. nightly, the Moose cranks up the rock while serving some of the best-rated food in the city. The menu starts at $6.95. Why party anywhere else in Vancouver when the Moose is right there? Get your horns up and rock with the Moose, the official party bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Are you an experiencer of something strange that can't be explained? Do you want help finding out what's going on? I'm Ryan Stacy, head of the Experiencer Support Association, otherwise known as TESSA. We've teamed up with Spaced Out Radio to investigate cases filled out in the SOR Sightlines report. We are independent and there's no cost to what we do. All we need is your experience. Let's find out what's happening together on the SOR Sightlines report.
Hey Space Travelers, this is John Resig, founder of the Tribe and Tribe Charities. If you know anything about our website, you know we like to do things a little different. We're not some faceless organization collecting money for a nebulous cause. Our donor dollars...
All right, Doc, I'm back.
Okay.
Let's get my hair out of the way here. There we go. All right. Let's see what we got going on here. Much time? We've got just over 2.5 minutes, or just under 2.5 minutes. Want to say a big thank you to our YouTube guys. Brett Lewis, thank you so much. Vinny for a couple of super chats. Bigfoot, Michigan Rob, James Short, Bob Acrylic, and Human Carl for the super chats tonight. Really do appreciate each and every one of you, man. Thank you so much for the love and the support, and everybody who has hit the thumbs up and down, along with our new subscribers that have jumped on in. We really appreciate you taking the time tonight. Thank you so much. Excuse me. Hold on. Who's mentioning Heather Thomas in the chat room? Because I had the biggest crush on her in the 80s. I had every poster of Heather Thomas that there was. The one in the pink bathing suit was my favorite. Was totally my favorite. Oh, I still love her. All right, we got just over under a minute here, boss.
Okay.
Oh, Stunt Brat, you were a stunt double for her. Oh my. Was that on the Fall Guy? I fell in love with her in the movie Zapped with Willie Ames and Scott Baio. All right, 15 seconds here, everyone. Here we go, everyone.
You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show.
Hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio is now underway. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us tonight. We really do appreciate it. I want to say hello to everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America and digitally on TalkStream Live and Revolution Radio. Remember, you can check out all of our archives for free by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Nurturology. Nurturology is your password. Use it wisely, Space Travelers, as the Clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. Tonight we talk with legendary UFO researcher Dr. Bruce Maccabee. His website is brewmac.mysite.com, and we are going to get into one of your latest studies here that you have done, sir, which is absolutely incredible in regards to what you call the NHI. You released this in October, just so a month ago, or less than a month ago. What led you to this study?
Well, we had mentioned earlier the Navy sightings. The one that's gotten the most attention, I guess, is the Tic Tac sighting. But the capabilities of these apparent craft to do all sorts of strange things that we can't begin to approach, mainly extreme accelerations and high speed and so on. Now, there has been all along, since this subject began, even with Kenneth Arnold, the first publicized sighting, the thought that human beings couldn't withstand the accelerations that these things undergo. An example of acceleration being a right-angle turn. I have a testimony from my grandmother, of all people. In 1947, Grandma was out hanging up the clothes in Greenfield, Massachusetts, when all of a sudden she said she recalled this for me in 1965 or 66, I think. Anyway, she said 2 round, shiny objects were heading westward, came over the top of a mountain that was right next to where she lived, and suddenly made a right-angle turn, headed north. Grandma was not an aerodynamics expert. She was not a physicist, yet she knew that things don't make right-angle turns. And this right-angle turn aspect has been emphasized by the people talking about the Navy reports of sightings when they were doing their maneuvers. One of the Navy guys, Kevin Day, talked about seeing extreme accelerations as one of these things would start at 28,000 feet and drop down to the surface of the ocean in 0.78 seconds, according to the measurements made by the spy radar on the Princeton destroyer. Anyway, we nevertheless, ever since this subject began, there's been the feeling that some sort of an intelligent creature of some sort is driving these things. They're not. They could be all mechanical, I suppose, but seems to be more likely that they are intelligent. But there seems to be a resistance to the ET hypothesis. Why couldn't it be something else? Time traveler, dimension traveler, whatever you can think of. So to make it more general and having to specify ET or something like that, I call it non-human intelligence, NHI. And we are confronted with the problem of what to do about these NHIs that are, well, I sort of get the impression they're playing with us. If you go walking along a country road and come to an anthill, do you bother to stop and talk to the ants? Or you can be real nasty and kick their anthill, I suppose. Otherwise, you just walk by and pay no attention to them, and they pay no attention to you. And you get the impression that that's sort of like what goes on with these NHIs. There have been reports of people being injured and even killed in Brazil, and maybe a few other places in the world, but by far most interactions between human beings and NHIs are an avoidance type. They try to get out of the way if we come along, and people who see these things may try to run away themselves. So there doesn't seem to be any attempt on their part to connect directly with us, and yet I could imagine they wonder why we don't admit that they exist yet. Well, at least as the bulk of the population of the human race probably does admit that they exist now, but it might be just barely over 50%. People have asked me, why isn't it admitted that these things are real? There's so many witnesses, and I say it's sort of like what I call the emperor has no clothes effect. Lots of people will see these things flying around and deny that they've seen them or not mention it or whatever, and then somebody will stand up and say, "Hey, they're real," and everybody else will say, "Yep, and we knew it." That's sort of the position that these Navy reports have taken. Somebody standing up and saying, "Look, they're real." The Navy itself is admitting that they can't explain these tapes. Now, I don't know whether that's going to be remaining true or not. Somebody might come up with some sort of a conventional explanation somehow, but that hasn't happened yet. So anyway, then that leaves us with a reality of NHI, and what is it going to do for or against us? That depends on whether we face love, hate, or indifference. If they made us, they may love us, and they're going to help us or leave us alone, or at least not injure us. If they hate us because we don't do what they want, or I don't know what would be the requirement for hating NHI. But anyway, if they hate us, then things could be bad for us. And more likely, what they seem to be doing is ignoring us. Love, hate, or indifference. Indifference, they don't pay any attention to what we're doing, unless we get in their way or they get in our way temporarily. The guy who was watching the radar on the Princeton destroyer, seeing these things drop from 28,000 feet, from 28,000 feet down to 50 feet above the surface of the ocean. He said the activities of these unusual things, that when they were flying at 100 knots at 28,000 feet with no visible means of propulsion or control surfaces that you would see on aircraft and so on, they seem to be doing their thing, traveling along, ignoring us, and it wasn't until we sort of perturbed them by flying towards them that they began to react in any way. And when they did react, they reacted in such a way that it was like they were saying, "Ha ha! Look at what we can do. You can't catch us." And then they would go about doing their thing again.
I gotta ask, what is your opinion of the new UAP task force? To me, as an outsider looking in, and many others I've spoken with as well, it really looks like there is a lot of naivety within Washington, D.C. regarding this topic. Is it really, or do we have that little information on it? Or if we have collected samples, such as Roswell, maybe Kecksburg, and other places, are those just not being brought to the forefront and still being ignored?
Well, I suspect that the reason for keeping this stuff, the reason for not letting it all hang out, goes back, I guess, to the late 40s. Maybe even before that, if they had information on NHIs flying around before 1947, and there may be such information, and certainly there have been sightings of weird things in the sky over the last several thousand years. If they probably, at the very beginning, especially when the Roswell crash occurred, knew that something was going on, and they were afraid. One thing they could be, one aspect had to do with the military aspect. You don't, if some tremendous technology falls into your lap, it would give you a leg up on anybody else when it came to an enforcement of a war of some sort. You would want to make sure that your enemies don't know that you've got this secret technology, because if they knew you had it, they would try to get it, and you might get it and learn how to use it before you would. So there's the defense aspect. Then there's the other, more general aspect of the impact on civilization, of the realization that there are creatures, I put in quotes, creatures, NHIs, flying around doing their thing, whatever it is, and there isn't anything we can do about it. That might have an impact on civilization, an impact even greater than coronaviruses.
Do you believe then that a lot of these politicians in Washington, D.C. know very minimal of what the military is actually hiding?
Yeah, I would say they know a little about it. There may be some people in Washington who have studied the subject, at least read a couple of books about it, and have some idea of the background. But it's not a subject that people spend much time on if they're interested in politics and other subjects, other parts of human culture. There isn't much you can do as a ufologist. There's no school of ufology that I'm aware of. The only people who get any money for it are the ones who write books about the subject. And I don't know anybody who can make a living writing a book about UFOs.
Okay, so with what would happen out in, with the Nimitz and the USS Princeton and everything like that, what leads you to believe that these Tic Tac type aircraft were actually of an extraterrestrial descent?
Well, they can do things that we can't. We don't know how to begin doing what they do in terms of acceleration and speed and so on. Also, the thing that one of the things that attracted Kenneth Arnold that I mentioned earlier. This is the first flying saucer sighting. The guy Kenneth Arnold, who sees these things going by, says that they flew in a zigzag manner, flipping and flashing like a saucer skipping on the water, and that's where the term came from, flying saucer. Not that it was supposed to look like a saucer, but the way it would go from side to side and flip and flash and so on. And he had the impression that it couldn't have been human beings on the inside, because the jerky motion would imply extremely high accelerations, which imply high G forces. Like you can feel the so-called G force, or the acceleration force. If you sit in a car and stomp the accelerator to the ground, and your car has a capability of speeding up, you feel yourself pushed into the seat. You can feel the effect of the acceleration. A human being can stand maybe 20 or 30 Gs for a short time, but when you calculate the accelerations of these objects, you get numbers that are hundreds or thousands of times the accelerating force of gravity. So the idea being then that either they're like us and they figured out how to counteract the G forces, the acceleration force, or else they're totally different from us, and being able to undergo a high acceleration is part of the nature of their living or something. In any case, they're not us. Another way of looking at it would be if you were in one of these craft and it did one of these zigzag motions, you'd probably be turned into jelly.
Okay, so knowing what you know, that the human body could not withstand this type of atmospheric and pressure on it, basically it would be torn apart. How do you think that whatever is in those is surviving? Do you think there's creatures in there flying, or do you think they're almost like alien-type drones?
Well, the creatures like us that are made of soft, squishy material, remember, think of it in terms of you're in a seat, and the seat is going to undergo acceleration. Like one of those rocket sled things that they used to have out on the plains in Nevada or wherever. And they'd get up to a couple of 100 miles an hour by the time they get to the end of the track that the rocket sled goes on. Think of yourself as being in a seat, in a chair. Think of yourself as being in a chair that's being accelerated. What happens is there's a force driving the chair, and you're sitting in the chair, and you have your own inertial. The law of inertia says your body is standing still and it intends to remain standing still until it gets pushed. And if it's getting pushed hard enough on your back, for example, maybe it's pushing so hard that it pushes your back right through to your front and turns you into something an inch thick, that wouldn't be good for your health. So that's what you think. That's what you think of in terms of the ability to undergo accelerations. Now, machinery can undergo accelerations much greater than human beings can. Consider being shot out of a gun and a bullet. The mechanism of the bullet, which may require, may be required to make it blow up at a certain altitude or a certain distance from the gun or whatever. There's some mechanism there that's controlling the bullet that has to be able to withstand the acceleration and still work. And we know for a fact that machinery can undergo high accelerations that would crush us. The machinery could live. So it may be that these NHIs are in fact mechanical, what we would call mechanical intelligences, driving these tic-tacs or whatever, saucer-shaped things, whatever. I wouldn't be surprised if, well, there's two ways to accomplish this. One is you design a device which can understand the accelerations it's going to have to undergo. For example, being shot out of a gun. By the time you get to the end of the gun barrel, you're going at hundreds of miles an hour, or maybe thousands of miles an hour, and you don't want to. A human being would be crushed at that sort of acceleration. Another less likely possibility but it nevertheless is to be considered, is you warp space around you in such a way that it's like you're in a box. Inside the box, you feel no acceleration at all, if it's warped correctly. The outside of the box sees you in this box as traveling at extremely high speed after a certain amount of acceleration. And you have avoided the acceleration hadn't crushed you because you created an inertial zone inside the box. But in order to be able to warp space to do that, we don't know. We don't have anything that will do that yet.
Do you believe then that these Tic Tacs or whatever they are of extraterrestrial descent, and we're just afraid to admit to that?
Well, yeah, extraterrestrial or something. I just say they're non-human intelligences.
Oh, okay, let me rephrase that. You do not believe, with your scientific background and your study on this, you do not believe that what these are capable of and what we've been able to see, that they are not of any type of human science.
I'm not aware of anything pointing towards the technology that would allow us to do what these things do. We're way behind them.
Could it be from the future?
Well, other people have suggested that as well. I don't know. I don't know how to do time travel. That's one reason why I just call these things NHI. They're some intelligence of some sort that's not human.
Okay, if it's not human, and this is an impossible question to ask, or to answer, I should say.
Impossible to answer.
Yeah, it's impossible to answer. Where do you think it's coming from?
Well, I don't know. I haven't spent a lot of time theorizing on where it might come from. If you can say, well, if there were 5-dimensional space, 4 dimensions of space and 1 of time, then they could come from another dimension of some sort. But that's just speculation. We don't know. We don't know that there are other dimensions. Every one of the possible ways, every one of the possible sources of these crafts that we have discussed so far tonight is based on largely speculation, except the good old E.T. get a dumb old spaceship and crank up your chemical explosive, or use light from a star or whatever. Essentially Newtonian mechanics, plain old Newtonian mechanics type of propulsion.
My friend, I'm going to get you to hold on right there, because we are going to go to break here at the bottom of the hour. Dr. Bruce Maccabee continues the UFO talk right after this on Spaced Out Radio. All right, my friend, we are clear.
Well, I hope I'm coming across well enough.
Oh, you're amazing as per usual. Excuse me. I just hope I'm doing you some justice tonight.
I think I'll mention a little anecdote related to Billy Ray Cyrus, who is in the news right now for saying he saw UFOs.
His daughter just came out saying that she saw one.
Yeah.
Although she said she was pretty stoned when it happened.
Yeah, what did she say? Wax? Something or other.
Something like that. I don't think I've ever seen a star brag about being stoned so much as she does.
She used to be such a nice little girl.
Yeah, boy, did she grow up.
Yeah, sort of like being the antithesis of her father. But on the other hand, we don't know how many people he knocked up.
Oh, who knows? Who knows?
Billy Ray Cyrus tells Kelly Clarkson about his UFO sightings. I've seen some crazy stuff, he says. That's in Facebook. Outsider.com.
Guaranteed he and Miley do a UFO show now. And they'll get paid big bucks for it.
Right. Well, I'm going to mention it because I have a piece of the action.
Yeah, we can do that. How much time we have here? Oh, we have just over 2.5 minutes.
Okay. This is halfway through the second hour, right?
Yes, we have 1 hour left with you. Told you it'd fly by.
Yep. I should do more talk shows to keep my brain running at high speed.
Why not? You need to get your information out there. I totally think you should.
I'm adding you to my friendship list.
Oh, I did add you. Earlier, I sent a request.
Yes, I just got your request and I answered it.
Yes. Yes. I'm friends with the legend. Friends with the legend. Oh, Mike L., I apologize in your chat room to you and your family that your twins are now driving. I remember that feeling when my daughter first got behind the steering wheel, and I had to do a double take because I saw her as a 3-year-old standing in her summer dress, in her little white sandals, standing at the steering wheel going vroom, vroom. And there she was, driving. I feel for you, man. I feel for you. Bomber, you're looking like a bombshell tonight. How are you, gorgeous? Here we go, guys. We're going to get the show going right now. We passed the halfway point of Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott, sitting in the captain's chair of SOR headquarters. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to remind you that if you have missed most of this show or others, check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. Here we go with Dr. Bruce Maccabee once again here on the show as we are talking everything UFOs. We're going to step into Hollywood a little bit here because you think that Billy Ray Cyrus has some aliens. He's been seeing them UFOs.
Right. Yeah, apparently there's a news story about him being interviewed by Kelly Clarkson and talking about UFOs. Everybody's going to be into UFOs nowadays, I guess. But it caught my interest because somewhere back in time, 2001, 2002 time frame, I was happened to be at his annual summertime big blowout for his fans at Thompson Station in Tennessee, a distance away from Nashville. And at that big party, I gave him a copy of a book I had just published called Abduction in My Family. Actually, it was originally called Abduction in My Life, but then I added some more stuff to it and called it Abduction in My Family. And I gave him a copy of it. I can't say that he definitely read it. I know his tour manager did, and found it very interesting. That book is available at Amazon. But anyway, that's a unique book. It's a novel based on the stories told by various abductees. Plus, it's a novel written wrapped around a fact book. So by the time you get finished, you actually know some factual stuff about UFOs, as well as what people say when they're reporting their abductions.
Do you think what we're seeing in Hollywood recently, with Billy Ray coming out, with Miley Cyrus coming out, with Demi Lovato now hanging out with Dr. Stephen Greer, trying to connect with CE5s with him and have that ET contact, do you think UFOs are making their popularity known in the pop culture now?
Well, I think the pressure to keep it silent is reducing as a result of this Navy stuff. When you now have major newspapers like the Washington Post, New York Times, and so on, reporting on UFOs without the standard ha 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 built into the writing, makes it more likely that people will be beginning to tell their stories. My daughter claims to have seen a bunch. I don't know whether she has or not. It's always hard to say. Other people I know are now willing to admit that they saw something weird. And so it could be that we're watching this whole thing to break open even as we speak. But we'll just have to wait and find out. Yeah, it seems to be the thing in Hollywood now to say that you have seen UFOs. After all, it's John Lennon's report of seeing one hovering outside his apartment house way back in sometime in the 70s.
Okay, so with that kind of popularity, is that good for the field, or does it make it a little bit disgraceful?
Well, the opinion of the hardcore skeptics is always going to be that there's nothing to it, and anybody who reports it is a disgraceful person. But I'd say that having all these well-known people admit that they've seen something strange is going to make it easier, maybe too easy. It'll get to the reverse situation where everything up there is a UFO, and people are seeing them all the time, all over the place. I certainly get a lot of photographic stuff. Some of it is good, some of it is bad, some of it is horrible. People will typically send me a picture, and it'll be a scene of some sort of a scenery, and in this scenery, somewhere, usually up in the sky area, there'll be a dark image of some sort of a shape, and they'll send me to. I always ask what were the conditions at the time and so on, the circumstantial evidence surrounding anything, and they'll tell me, oh, I took this picture 5 years ago, and I filed it away, and I was just looking at it the other day, and I saw this dark thing up in the sky image, and could this be a UFO? And I have to say, I don't know. Does it do anything UFO-like? Did it suddenly accelerate and disappear? Did it hover over your head and you couldn't hear any noise? What did it do that would made it UFO-like? Now, if it looks like it's got wings, it might be a bird, or it might be a plane, or, well, maybe even Superman. But typically the image will be so indistinct that you can't tell what it is, and I have to write back and say, well, I can't, there's not enough information. So I know that people will be more likely to report weird things now than they were, because they're less likely to get scolded for doing that. As long as famous people admit to what they're having. Take for example, President Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was governor of California in the mid-'70s. When was that? He was the governor of California in the mid-'70s, and he and the pilot and some passengers saw this object that seemed to be tracking their airplane. And then there was a famous
Okay, so as you move forward with this entire phenomena that is going on, what can we say for certain is going on? From the people you've talked to what you explain, are we being visited? Are people getting taken, like Betty and Barney Hill or Travis Walton? Is this phenomena out of control?
Well, they've been in control all along. I don't know if we've ever had any control ourselves. We may have thought so. But the big question is, what are they doing here? And the only way we can learn about that, since we can't grab one or haven't yet, so far as I know, been able to grab one and put it under a microscope and examine how it works and what it does and so on. Lacking that, we have to do things like make deductions from what these objects do when they're in the atmosphere flying around. And that information itself, just watching these things travel from one point A to point B in a zigzag manner or something, we know that they're doing things that we wouldn't do or probably couldn't do. Then out of abductions, reading about abductions, you get all sorts of things. One of the cases that I worked on in Gulf Breeze with Ed Walters was an abductee, and he told stories that he were based on, first of all, on dreams that he had, and second of all, on what came out under hypnosis with a clinical psychologist doing the hypnosis. And what Walters recounted under hypnosis was what looked like a learning experience for them. He told a story of the following nature. First of all, he's in a room. You can see the walls of the room, and there's two 50-gallon steel barrels in the middle of the room, and there's him and two little kids. Now there's room in the barrels for him and one kid stays out, or the two kids in the barrels and he's not in a barrel. Well, he's standing there with these two kids wondering how he got into this room, and all of a sudden a hole opens in the wall and some alligator-looking like creature, dragon, comes waddling into the room and is obviously heading for them. So he has to make an immediate decision. Does he save the kids and allow himself to be chewed up or does he save himself and one kid? And he takes the choice of saving the two kids by putting them in the barrel, and he's ready to grapple with this monster when all of a sudden the walls recede. He's no longer in a small room. He's now in a big room, and they put him on a table. He's sitting on a table, and underneath what do we call it, a hat, a framework that goes over his head that has pressure points at the left and right temples and a pressure point at the front of his forehead and the back of his head. So he's got four contacts stuck on his head. Then he said they bring in a bunch of these little versions of the big creatures that are running the show. These little creatures are set on a table. Each one has the same sort of hat that they put on Ed, and then he finds himself reliving this experience of having I recounted the dragon coming into the room and getting ready to eat them up. And he relives that, and he said typically they would do several experiments with him during a night when he was asleep. Supposedly this is, as I said, all came out under hypnosis. He would undergo several experiences, and then he'd be put on a table after each experience, put this funny hat on his head, and little ones would be brought into the room where he's in, and little hats put on them, and then he'd relive this experience that he had just lived. Now, there wasn't much physical evidence that anything like this ever happened, but one night, May 1, 1988, he had one of these experiences, and he called me up the next day to describe how he had on his head. He didn't know why. He did not remember these experiences directly. They did not come out until several months later under hypnosis. But he had on his head, he said he discovered that there was a red dot a little bit above the center of his nose, a little bit above eyebrow level, a bump on the back of his head, and red dots on the left and right temples. In other words, it looked like pressure points. If you push something against your skin and hold it there long enough, it'll redden. Anyway, he couldn't explain at the time why those marks were there. That was finally explained several months later under hypnosis. But the point that I'm bringing out is, if he's even remotely correct in what they're doing, they're trying to learn something from us, perhaps to learn how to be human beings. I don't know. We've heard all sorts of explanations and suggestions as to what the aliens, the NHIs, might be doing here.
Has there been any patterns that you have been able to pick up, or your colleagues have been able to pick up, about if and when things are going to happen?
Well, aside from the trite response that things are happening all the time, big things like sudden revelation, I don't know. There could be total disclosure by us. There could be total disclosure by them. The classic landing on the White House lawn, instead of saying, "Take me to your leader," they'd say, "I am your leader." But aside from guesswork like that, I'm not aware of any definitive estimates as to what's going to be happening.
What do you think would happen if disclosure actually did happen?
If disclosure actually did happen? Well, you mean disclosure in the form of the president standing up and saying, "Yep, they're here, we've known it all along." At which point the government would probably shut itself down, because newsmen and other people would be criticizing the government continually for withholding the information, and then they'd be asking, "What do we do about it?" It might even be a situation somewhat comparable to the virus situation, where you know that something bad is happening and it could get worse. You don't know what you can do about it. You're going to blame, if there's anybody to blame, you'll blame them, but blaming somebody doesn't solve the problem.
Okay, so do you believe that this would blow up the economy?
Well, it also depends on what they're doing. If the president makes an announcement that they're real, and nothing else changes, we still have sightings and abductions and so on, but there's no big real direct impact on civilization. Then if the president made an announcement and said, but don't worry, we've got it handled, you'd find a lot of shakiness in civilization, but probably could continue if we could last the first year or so with the knowledge that they're real. If they haven't done anything now, if they start shooting laser beams at our bridges and blowing up civilization one way or another, then Wall Street would go to hell at that point.
Okay, so there's a lot of people, myself included, who believe that disclosure of any sort, Dr. Maccabee, would not be good for this planet, considering half the planet is still very religious and believing that anything from the stars that is not angelic is demonic and evil. There's a lot of violence still on this planet. There is a lot of people out there who believe that the economy, like we just talked about, could potentially collapse. Governments around the world would collapse. People would be rushing into parliament buildings and government buildings all over demanding answers to try and figure out what we know. Would the government's biggest play or power play on this be to tell the subjects and their people that they knew nothing of this, keeping things like Roswell or Kecksburg or Shag Harbor or whatever as much of a secret as possible?
I suspect that if they take the first step in freeing up information about Roswell or what they may know about other types of crashes and things like, it's not just one non-human intelligence, it's 5 or 7 or 10 or 15 or 20 or there's all sorts of creatures coming to visit us. Once they get started on that path, it's going to, I expect it's going to accelerate if they're not careful. It's accelerate and may drive civilization crazy. It's like when you know they're here, you get scared, you say, well, I'll head for the hills. And then you realize they can get you in the hills too. Where do you go? People will want to get away unless the creatures are all sweetness and light and aren't kidding. If they portray themselves as saviors of humanity, then human beings will be happy to welcome them, I suppose. And
are we ready for that?
Well, I doubt that we're ready for it. There's too many confusing things going on at the same time. I mean, the mere thought that there's not one intelligence, one civilization or whatever, but 4 or 5 or 7 or 10 or whatever, and they've been here for tens of thousands of years. The average person wouldn't know how to react, I presume, in a logical way. Trying to get away from the whole thing. If the creatures landed in cities, people would run for the country. If the creatures landed in the countries, people would run into the cities. Somebody would be sooner or later crank up the army, I guess. And if the human race, individual human beings with the political power to do it, might initiate a war against the creatures. But that could be self-defeating.
But should we call it an invasion, though? We don't know if it's going to be. We don't know if it's going to be they come down here with violence, the way Tom DeLonge says it's going to break down. We don't know if they're going to come in peace and offer us all cookies and milk. We don't know if they're finally going to bring fighting back into hockey. Hopefully. Hopefully it's the good aliens like that. But we really don't know of any sort of agenda. Yet there are many people in this field who believe that there are people within certain agencies of the government who do have some sort of contact with some extraterrestrial species. Do we have any inkling whatsoever, or is much of this hyperbole?
Well, I don't know of any evidence. I mean, things like the president was really a reptilian or something like that. I don't know how to answer the questions of how are we supposed to react. Everybody's going to have to pick out for themselves what they think is the right thing to do, and that's going to mean it's like you stomp your foot down on the anthill and the ants suddenly go running in all sorts of directions. They don't know. They don't run in a correlated manner the way they would if they were allowed to be by themselves. We would have people doing all sorts of things to getting away, and some people would try to brown nose the aliens to get specialized treatment from the aliens while doing bad things to the human population. Human beings would end up fighting amongst themselves for position within an administration that's administered by the aliens, I suppose.
Well, I mean, that's the big question, because it all ties back again to this entire threat phenomena that we hear people like Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon talking about, as well as people in Washington like Marco Rubio. We're hearing all of this, and unfortunately we don't have time to get your answer, but when we come back from the break, Dr. Maccabee, I'd like to talk to you about the idea of this being a threat, and if so, how is it a threat? I think that's an important topic for people to learn on. So, yeah, let's just get to it. Let's get to it. Hour number 3 of Spaced Out Radio is coming up next. Dr. Bruce Maccabee is our guest. He is a legend in UFO research. Legend. 60 years of research into this phenomena. We'll find out. Are UFOs a threat? Coming back on Spaced Out Radio next. All right, my friend, I'm just going to run my dogs outside one final time here. I'll be right back in a moment.
Our Space Traveler. The Space Travelers Club is a place where you can interact with other listeners, either live during the show or on our great forum. We want your stories, pictures, comments, and ideas. You'll get live video streams, exclusive content, and be a part of our newsletter. Stay in touch with everything SOR. The Space Travelers Club is just $5 a month at spacedoutradio.com.
Hello, this is your guitar man, Ron Bumblefoot Thal, and I have to tell you, I love the response I get for Little Brother is Watching from Spaced Out Radio fans. It's amazing how music can inspire and make people think deeper about what's going on in the supernatural world. You can head over to my website, bumblefoot.com, to check out my music, my guitar workshops, my touring, even check out some of the hot sauces that I'm working on. And make sure you keep on listening, because with Spaced Out Radio, you know Little Brother is watching.
Hi there, this is the paranormal lawyer Michael W. Hall. I'd like to invite you to listen in each Sunday night where we're going to open up your eyes to everything strange and paranormal. I will be hosting some great guests with topics that affect us all, such as UFOs, ghosts, and everything paranormal. Let's learn together on Spaced Out Radio Sunday with myself, Michael W. Hall, the paranormal lawyer at spacedoutradio.com.
The SOR Vault is open for business, and do we have some cool swag for you to pick up? All you have to do is head over to our website and click on the SOR Vault. You have a variety of cool logos to choose from, and put them on anything you want. T-shirts, hoodies, hats, coffee mugs, you name it, we can get it to you. So do your shopping by supporting the store you love. Get your Spaced Out Radio swag at the SOR Vault today. We're adding to the entertainment online for Spaced Out Radio. I'm Amber Beckard, and I want to invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out Cryptid Tales, where I will take you on a journey into some of the strangest legends and lore from around the world, relaying the stories to you of the strange creatures and experiences that people have had throughout time. You can find Cryptid Tales at youtube.com/spacedoutradio, and while you're there, don't forget to check out our free archives and leave a comment. See you there.
Looking for creative ways to get your company out in the public? How about advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Our sales department is waiting to hear from you, and we can work around any budget. From commercial spots to banners to special promotions, there are many opportunities to get your name and product out to our SOR listeners. For a price guide and more information, please contact us at sales@spacedoutradio.com.
We are scouring the world for the most intriguing stories of your day. Take the time to read up on the SOR Newswire, where our team, led by Captain Shirk, will deliver to you some of the best paranormal and supernatural news, along with some stories that will blow your mind from the weird to the wacky. It's the news outside the news that piques interest, and that's what we're looking to deliver to you. The SOR Newswire, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Hello, space travelers. It's me again, Carl. Don't forget to join the Space Travelers Club for just $5 a month. And follow Spaced Out Radio on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Our Instagram, Dave Scott SOR. Our Facebook page is Spaced Out Radio Show. Our archives are free at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Come woo it up with Spaced Out Radio today. Bye!
Hey. All right, I'm back. We have 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes here, boss.
I'm back.
Okay.
I'll be back.
No problem. No problem. So when we get to the final break, just get you to hold on until we go into break, and then I'll say goodnight to you at the break, okay?
Okay.
Yeah. So that way you get a nice goodbye from us, and we'll all clap for you and everything.
I'll mention at least one of my books.
Yeah. You can mention them all if you want.
I got 4 out there right now. I have the only book written about the Kenneth Arnold case. You would think that after 70 years, there'd be several books written about that one case since that started the whole thing, sort of.
For sure. For sure. Okay, we got about 45 seconds. Big thank you again to everybody who participated in the Super Chat tonight. Bigfoot Michigan Rob ×2, Vinny ×2, Brett Lewis, We have James Short, Bob Acrylic, and Human Carl. Really do appreciate the love, especially everybody who's given us a thumbs up tonight listening to this show. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun, and we're going to get going here in about 10 seconds. Okay, everyone, here we go.
If you'd like to connect with us, head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Third and final hour is underway on Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We welcome back everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America and digitally on TalkStream Live and Revolution Radio. Remember, you can check out all of our archives for free by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Nurturology. Nurturology is your password. Use it wisely, space travelers, as the Clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. For the final time tonight, we introduce author, scientist, researcher of everything UFO, Bruce Maccabee. His website, brewmac.mysite.com, and I highly suggest you check it out. It's filled with information. Dr. Maccabee, welcome back.
Thank you.
Right before the break, we talked about the threat phenomena. How real should we be taking this as a threat?
Well, it depends on what they do to or for us, I guess, and of course how we react to it. We've heard from Jacques Vallée, famous ufologist who's done investigations in Brazil of sightings down there where people have claimed that UFO creatures have killed some people. And of course, people all over the earth disappear every year, never to be found. And we don't know what happens to them. It could be that one of the great, maybe the non-human intelligences are causes for fear of being not just abducted. The abductees get brought back one way or another, and typically can resume their lives, but with a change in their mental attitude towards life, I suppose. But the people who get abducted and don't come back, we don't get any information on at all. Now, from reading hundreds of UFO cases, I've gotten the impression that they're doing whatever they want to do, and if we get in the way, they might do something, but most of the time they're going to just try to avoid interacting with us. That's like the Betty and Barney Hill case that sort of started off our abduction phenomenon. They wanted to learn something about physiology of Betty and Barney and put them back to resume their lives. Of course, they couldn't resume their lives normally because they had this big event happen to them. But as far as the creatures were concerned, the NHIs running the craft that Betty and Barney went into, the creatures had done what they wanted to do and then went off and did something else. Some people, I guess, get abducted multiple times. I don't know what that amounts to. But if they were trying to adapt to us, you might have a situation like I had described, Ed Walters describing under hypnosis. If they were trying to make us adapt to them, I'm sure there would be human beings who would reject that and might try to fight back somehow or other. I kind of suspect that Navy, the Army, Navy, and Air Force people who have been confronted with these things over the years have tried to ignore it as much as possible because they realize there's nothing they can do. If you tangle with one of these things, your chances of coming out better than they would are probably pretty slim. I mean, if you suppose you decided you want to shoot at one of these things, if it can accelerate fast enough, it can get out of the way of the bullet. On the other hand, it may be built to withstand stuff. I recall a case from the mid-1950s, I think it was, of a hunter out in the woods. He's got a rifle, and he's hunting deer or something like that. And he notices up above the treetops this round, circular, shiny thing that seems to be following him. He gets a little scared of it and fires his gun. And he hears the bullet hit and go careening off. If you ever heard a bullet go careening off something or other, it's a very distinctive sound. So he knew that it was solid. The thing then disappeared. He was left by himself. Whatever it was, it absorbed the blow and left. We can imagine that if it had been angry at him, that it would have done more than just leave. But leaving these scenes seems to be typical of most of the interactions, at least that we are aware of. The interactions that we are aware of are the ones that end in a nice manner. The witness is still alive and can resume his life one way or another. There have been studies of various types to decide what would happen if human beings came into contact with what we would probably consider to be superior beings. We know from our own experience that the native populations of the South Seas, which lived in a civilization, technological civilization of several hundred years ago, when they were confronted with the technology that was needed to fight World War II. When the war was over and airplanes were no longer delivering stuff to various islands in Indonesia, these natives themselves, the Tassidae, I believe it was, built model airplanes, large-scale model airplanes, in the hopes of attracting these things that had flown over the area for several years, dropping good stuff. If the aliens drop good stuff to human beings, I'm sure there will be people who will soak it up and be happy to live with it. We've heard all sorts of things. The reason for human beings, like human beings created by advanced non-human intelligences to work the gold mines or something like that. And we don't have any real explanations yet for why there are big chunks of buildings underwater and on tops of mountains that look like they've been blasted apart by atomic bombs. So we pretty well know the history of the human race in the last 4,000 or 5,000 years, but anything going back before that is pretty much of a mystery. It might not be a mystery to them. They might be able to tell us more about ourselves than we can say. One thing is certain, though: human beings are amazing conglomerations of 92 elements. Not even all of the 92. Probably about 30 or 40 elements that are needed to create a human being. And perhaps the NHIs know how that's done. Perhaps they were created in the same way. Somebody had to start off somewhere, and you can make the same statement for the universe itself, I guess. We hear about the Big Bang Theory as explaining how the universe started, but that really doesn't tell us much that's useful information.
I want to get to a story that a lot of people have been asking about in our chat room tonight, and that's in regards to the experience with this cloaked being that your wife had, which was shown in David Paulides' Missing 411, The Hunters documentary. What happened there?
Well, the story is that she was in a tree stand 15 feet high in the woods. The sun was at her back, shining through some of the woods, and she was looking to the east, and she was sitting there in camouflage, ready to, with a bow and arrow, ready to kill a deer. And she was talking to a friend of hers on her cell phone, and she said to him, something strange is going on. The forest suddenly went quiet. And then she notices, she's looking eastward, she notices at her left side, towards the left, some sort of a weird distortion going on. Hard to describe exactly what it was like, but when she described it to me the first time, the first thing that popped into my head was the movie Predator, where you can't actually see the creature itself, but what you see is how it modifies the light from sources that are on the other side of the creature, and infrared as well. But in any event, that was sort of what popped into my mind as a way of connecting up what she saw, this distortion moving through it. The shape of the distortion was very crudely like a human being, and she said it looked like it was about 20 feet off above the ground, going from one tree to another, and it went across her field of view in the front, in front of her, probably 15 or 20 feet away. And just as it disappeared, she took a picture of it. She had been taking pictures with her BlackBerry phone, and had taken a couple of pictures of herself, and then this thing went by, and then she took another picture of herself, and sat there in her chair for another hour approximately, waiting for some deer to come along. Nothing happened. When she got out of her tree stand, this was in September of 2010, by the way. When she got out of her tree stand, she had forgotten about this weird thing she had seen, and didn't remember it until she got into the house, had dinner with a friend that had come over for supper, and her step-grandson was marching in a band at a high school about a mile away, and he said that they had seen a bright light appear in the sky and move a little bit and then disappear and then reappear again and move some more and then disappear again. And he had sent this email message to me about this light he had seen. And I read it to the people that were there. Look at Matthew saw something weird tonight. And at that point, Jan remembered that she had seen something weird and went ahead and described it. And I investigated her sighting. The result of the investigation is on my website, brumac.mysite.com. And you scroll down the listing of paragraphs until you get to Jan's weird phenomenon, I think it is. In any case, I copied pictures out of her phone, and I found that the pictures taken before this thing appeared and the pictures taken a long time after, or after it disappeared, were normal. But the one picture that, when this thing would have been in the field of view, it just doesn't, it's supposed to be trees and leaves and branches and stuff like that. It's not none of that. It's totally weird. And you can see on my website exactly what she got and what happened to something happened to the camera. It affected the camera in some way, so the camera took a picture that was impossible to take. Not only did it not show the scene that it was looking at, the number of pixels in the picture were different from what would be normal. So anyway, anybody who's interested can go to the website and find a lot of stuff there to read.
Now, you also, in that same area, had UFO sightings almost simultaneously.
Well, the sighting by Jan's nephew, Matthew, that could be considered a UFO sighting. Some light that appeared. I don't know what other appearances you might be talking about.
Well, at the high school, not you personally, but in that area.
That was it. That's what. If he had not reported to me a sighting of a light, Jan probably never would have thought about her own weird event that night. Anyway, she might have remembered later. But because he sent me a description of this light that he saw, I read it to the assembled masses, people that came to dinner, and that's what alerted Jan to the fact that she had something weird happen to herself. I can't be sure that those two sightings, the sighting of the creature and the sighting of the light, were related. I can't say that, but they did happen about an hour apart.
Now, a lot of people believe that Sasquatch does have the ability to cloak or camouflage itself. Do you believe that that's what your wife saw?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if Bigfoot can camouflage its weight as well as its visibility, because if it still weighed something, it would have bent down the branches. She would have seen something of a couple of 100 pounds or 200 pounds worth of weight on the branches of the trees that it was sort of swinging from one tree to the next. That's the impression she got.
Okay. So what do you think it is that she saw or captured on that photo?
Well, I don't know what I don't know what it was. I do know we've had a couple of similar cases mentioned to us. Some lady who saw something weird in somebody else's backyard, and you can read this stuff on the website. The entrance in the section of the website that covers her sighting.
Has that ever happened again?
Not to us.
How about your neighbors?
Never asked them.
I don't blame you. How do you ask that question to your neighbors? Hey, by the way, do you got some weird cloaked figures running through your forest?
Yeah. Did you see the predator walking down the road the other day?
How did your wife stay so calm through that entire phenomena?
Well, people react differently to different situations. She didn't feel threatened, so, and she, by the time she realized that something weird was happening and she's taking a picture, the thing's basically gone. This is a few seconds worth of time, I guess. 5 or 10 seconds maybe. I'm not sure. There may be a time on the photo itself. I'm not sure. I don't remember now. In any case, it didn't strike her as something to be afraid of.
I couldn't imagine sitting in that deer stand for another hour, unless it was just out of complete fear that if she got down, that something may happen.
Well, she never said that. She never said she was afraid. Maybe she should have been.
Would you have been?
Well, I don't know.
It's hard to know unless you're put in that position. We've only got less than 3 minutes left with you tonight. And, I would love it if you could tell our audience where they can find your books.
Well, I can find my books on Amazon. If you simply look up my name on Amazon, there's four books there. One, these are basically history books. A book called The FBI-CIA UFO Connection, which tells you what pretty dense history of how we got to where we are in the early years from 1947 into the 1950s, based on what the FBI and the CIA and so on had collected. And that one book also describes what I found when I sort of penetrated the CIA a little bit to find out what they knew. That would be the FBI-CIA UFO Connection. Then I have another one which is devoted, the only book devoted to the first sighting. I put first in quotes because it wasn't the first sighting, but it was the first flying saucer sighting by Kenneth Arnold. It's called 3 Minutes in June, named after the fact that the total sighting was 3 minutes, and our whole world changed during those 3 minutes. And then I wrote a book called The Legacy of 1950, which is 1952. 1952 was the year when the Air Force collected the most sightings in May, June, July, and August of 1952, and established a tradition, which is the legacy of 1952, is a tradition that there's nothing to UFOs. Therefore, if any organization like the Air Force or the Army or the Navy or whoever wants to ignore sightings, they just go ahead and don't say anything about them, because it's a tradition that there's nothing to UFOs. That's 3 books. Then the 4th book is called Abduction in My Family, which is based on abduction stories, and it's a novel wrapped around a fact book, so a documented fact book. So you learn some facts at the same time you learn what abductees learn what abductees say. And it's amusing to me to see Billy Ray Cyrus is now saying he saw UFOs. He may well have read my book. I gave it to him way back in 2001 or 2002. He may have read it and decided it was okay to talk about the subject after all.
My friend, it is time for us to say goodnight to you. Thank you so much for coming on Spaced Out Radio tonight, Dr. Bruce Maccabee. I really appreciate it. Coming up next, we're going to hook up with Vancouver, go right across Canada on the shift, and we got the thought of the day with the SOR Newswire, jam-packed. Spaced Out Radio last half hour coming up. Dr. Maccabee, we're going to give you a few claps for this.
Okay, thank you.
Great show. Great show. Let's do this again.
Yep, just as long as you don't give me the clap.
No, I won't do that, my friend. I won't do that. But I'll let you get to bed. Watch out for them aliens. Watch out for them big feet.
Your voice just suddenly faded out.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got my microphone up too high.
Oh, I didn't know what you said.
I said, watch out for them Bigfoot and watch out for them aliens.
Yep. Will do.
We'll talk to you soon, my friend. Take care.
Yep, thanks to you for the invitation.
Take care. Good night.
Bye.
All right. Now, I'm going to get the shit scared out of me here momentarily when Skype starts ringing and it's Vancouver. Thurston Howell III. How's Lovey? Thanks, Brett Lewis. Couldn't have done it without you. Hey, Thurston, you might as well change your picture to Thurston Howell III, because we're not dropping that. We're so not dropping that. Thanks, Bombshell Bomber. I'll even run my fingers through it for you. Thanks, Max Ritchie. Blame Corns, the booking guy, for this fantastic guest. Hey, that didn't scare me this time. You didn't scare me this time.
That's good. How's it going tonight, Dave Scott?
Not bad. Say hello to all the listeners around the world.
Hi, listeners around the world to Spaced Out Radio. Hope you are all safe and looking fine tonight.
Yeah, are you back in studio or are you at home now?
Well, I've always been in the studio in Vancouver. The other chumps are broadcasting from their homes.
Yeah, because you guys are locked down again down there, aren't you?
In Vancouver?
Yeah.
It's looking to be. It's not like a full-on lockdown, but there's definitely some measures that are starting to be put in place. I wouldn't be surprised if we get locked down personally, but a lot of numbers.
Manitoba just got locked down again, didn't they?
Manitoba did, and I think Toronto might be on its way.
Yeah, damn Toronto. Well, you know, it's Toronto.
Yeah, Toronto. Yeah, so we're back in about 90 seconds or so.
Sure.
Does that shape up all good on your end?
Yeah, did you guys change your breaks? Because before I eliminated a minute of my commercials in order to accommodate you guys, but because I'm still like 2 minutes away.
That's weird. Well, I'll check my log. Like we'll aim to come to you at 36 regardless, because that's what we've been normally doing.
36 is good. 36 is good.
Sounds good. All right, we will chat with you shortly, Dave.
All right, thanks, buddy. The live behind the scenes radio. All right, we got 90 seconds. I will, BBD Warrior. I promise you within the next 24 to 48 hours, I will get those. And remember, you are paying Canadian money on that. One minute, people. 1 minute. Hi, Red-Headed Lisa. Hey, Ron, I thought you were leaving, man. Thought you were leaving. I went to the chiropractor today, again. Got completely bone crunched. My thumb and my finger are still numb. Feels weird. But we're getting it fixed. Here we go. We rounded third. We're heading for home tonight on Spaced Out Radio. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us tonight. We really do appreciate it. We're going to hook up with Vancouver here momentarily. Let's see where they are right now.
2 days before anybody else.
I don't know if they're ready for us yet, but I want to remind you that if you missed portions of this show or others, you can check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Let's check in with Vancouver. How we doing, my friend?
Radio. This guy. He's on the radio all the time. I did get a tour of his studio too.
You did get a tour of my studio.
I did, and it was awesome. Dave Scott, Spaced Out Radio, is here. It is an awesome studio, and he even has a green screen. Not quite sure why it's radio, but don't tell him that. He doesn't need that yet.
I know, I haven't used it yet. But you know what? I have to say, I think it's pretty sad that the radio studio that I am working in now, that I have built for myself, is literally nicer than any radio studio that I ever worked in when I was in terrestrial radio.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I've been lucky. I can't complain. I did work in some old ones. There's an old mansion in St. Catharines that's a channel that belongs to another company, so I won't say what it is, but it is a 150-year-old mansion, and I worked in there, and that thing was old. We're talking like 70s, 80s old.
No kidding.
I had some nice ones, too. I had some nice ones. Oh, it's good. I can't complain. It's beautiful studios. How are you, Dave Scott?
I'm good. Let me just reset the reel-to-reel here, and we can get going.
Break out the razor blades and your grease pencils and start marking it up.
You got that right. Anything for a little aliens, you know. Anything for a little aliens.
I did still play vinyl when I started in radio. We still did have vinyl shows, so that's cool. All right, so Dave Scott, we've got a lot to talk about here on the show in regards to a couple of things in particular. One, the UFOs, and another one, which I have no idea how this is going to connect to where you're going to take us. I'm slightly concerned, would be the election. So, what do you? He cautiously says, "Where would you like to go today?"
Yeah, where do you want to go, man? Where do you want to do? Where do you want to start? Let's just get into it. Do we just jump in?
Let's get in this election thing and get it over with. I feel like it's a Band-Aid, so let's get started.
All right, so the big thing in the UFO world with a lot of people out there right now is they were thinking that in order to have some sort of UFO disclosure, and I'm using quotation marks when I say that, disclosure
I can see them in my mind.
Is the fact that it has to be a Democratic president. So there's been a numerous amount of people from Tom DeLonge of the To the Stars Academy to longtime UFO lobbyist, registered UFO lobbyist, a gentleman named Stephen Bassett from the Paradigm Research Group, who are all excited that if Hillary Clinton would have won 4 years ago, that we would know that aliens do exist, UFOs do exist, and, you know, we've had contact from other worlds. Then Mr. Trump comes in, wins by a surprise 4 years ago, and the interesting part about that is President Trump has spoken actually quite candidly about not knowing anything about UFOs, but he's taken on the subject numerous amount of times, more than any other president in recent history. So the big question is, you know, with everything that is going on with COVID and with the economy and borders shut down, how can UFOs become a topic? It wasn't, as it was hopefully being expected during the presidential race, but now that President-elect Joe Biden has come in, there is hope within the UFO field again that once he gets settled into the Oval Office, that there may be room to discuss UFOs once again. I don't personally think it'll happen for at least 6 months to a year. He's got a few other things he may have to worry about. That's President-elect Biden. Plus, there is all the potential of election fraud and everything going on. Got to keep it equal because we call things down the middle here. And that's where it is. I mean, UFOs were expected to be a hot-button topic. And then everything kind of went crashing on down. So the UFO crowd doesn't know where to go these days. And half of them are crying, half of them are cheering, but nobody's looking up to the sky to really see what the aliens wanted.
There's a text that comes in. It says, hey, Nick from Winnipeg here. Good evening, guys. Question for Dave Scott. Do you think the aliens have left Earth for a safer planet? Maybe a planet with less politics.
Nick in Manitoba, I would say no. Why would they leave? This is the greatest reality show ever. Planet Earth. It never ends. It's on 24/7. You can change the time zones. You could change the channel, change the country, change the language, change the heritage. You want nature, you go there. You want the National Geographic, you go there into the oceans. No way, man. We've got everything they want. This is sex, drugs, rock and roll for aliens. And if I'm an alien sitting on a spaceship right now, I've got my craft parked in neutral watching this entire show go on. It is amazing.
Somewhere over Utah or Alabama, let's just say.
Sure.
So, Dave, when you talk about the conversation with the president, I mean, I get it now. You know, it's 6 months or so. I mean, there's clearly other priorities. I think that if anybody saw a politician walk out and say, hey, by the way, all COVID and election stuff going on, let's talk about the UFOs, they're probably going to get, people are going to wonder. But what is it that people expect truly? Are they just looking for acknowledgement, or are they truly looking for like a dig deep into the files? What are the secrets?
Well, what's going to be interesting in seeing what happens with the UFO task force, or the UAP TF, that was formed shortly, just a couple of months ago, by Marco Rubio and the Intelligence Committee to try and figure out what is happening. Are these aerial threats in United States airspace and in military training grounds? So when we take a look at that, the head of that department and the majority of the Intelligence Committee were, I believe, and I know my American listeners are probably going to correct me on this, but I believe the majority of them were Republican. So it's going to see how that breaks down. But we also know that Joe Biden worked very closely with a gentleman named John Podesta. John Podesta was basically the top civilian working for President Obama during his 8-year run in the White House. He then left Obama's team to join and run Hillary Clinton's campaign. Podesta, who is a giant UFO fan, and was really pushing the media back at that time and urging them, almost begging them on social media, especially Twitter, to ask Hillary about the UFO subject. And they wouldn't until about 6 weeks before the election. And the fact that he has a relationship with Joe Biden, and if Biden, ends up becoming president, because I don't know what the hell is going on anymore down there. I don't think most people do. What we have to think is that Podesta will generate some interest and intrigue in that conversation about UFOs. The other interesting aspect about it is Podesta is also tied to Tom DeLonge through emails, which we learned through WikiLeaks and their leaks a few years ago. We also learned that, he has worked closely with the Stars Academy with Chris Mellon, who is a former deputy of the Department of National Defense. And they're all on the UFO subject. Why they're all on it, we don't know. It could be for profit. It could be for military. It could be for anything. But it's going to be interesting to see because all of these players are lining up.
Well, it seems like an awful lot of big names, at least familiar names, if nothing else. How is it, though, that this community continues to, sort of strive forward and strive forward? Why is it that they need this affirmation from the government? I mean, isn't there enough information out there to make people believe?
Well, there should be. There should be. But, I mean, you look at the way this subject has been covered in the media. We have talked about that before. Every news story, they bury it at the back end, and it's played with the X-Files theme song or Star Trek or the Twilight Zone. And then you have the person do the story. The anchor comes back, usually with a little snicker and snide comment that takes all seriousness out of the story. And for years, on both sides of the border, that has been happening. What they're trying to get to now is to bring this to the mainstream, saying, look, this phenomena is happening. We do not know what it is. This is potentially the second biggest story in humankind's history, next to Jesus Christ coming down from the heavens. And we better start looking up to the sky because we're getting a little full on this planet, and we're going to have to eventually move off. We're going to have to go to the moon. We're going to have to go to Mars, potentially elsewhere, and we got to know what's out there. Add to the fact that when you look at all the experiences that people have had, whether they're reporting to Chris Rutkowski in Winnipeg, whether they're reporting to Grant Cameron, whether they're reporting to MUFON Canada, TESA, the Experiencers Research or the Experiencers Support Association, MUFON in the United States, or anybody like that, people are having these weird objects that they are seeing. Some are even having personal encounters with extraterrestrials. And the people who are having these, unfortunately, are still being blackballed and labeled as kooks in society. And that's what they're trying to get rid of. That's what the UFO field wants. As I always say to people, once you've seen UFOs or extraterrestrials, everything is always aliens. If you've never had that experience, it's never aliens. And that's where we have to kind of bridge that gap to make sure that we know what we're talking about, number one, but number two, that the people who are having those experiences are treated for what those experiences are worth, rather than just throwing those people in a side drawer in your kitchen and hoping they don't come out.
Okay, so that's interesting, Dave. You say that once you've seen behind the wizard's curtain, you can't unsee it. So are you talking about, perspective of after you've had an alien encounter, that you start to just look at so many things differently? Like, this is just silly, but it's what comes to mind, like what's in the shadows? Well, that was strange. That wasn't a coincidence. That couldn't be a coincidence. Here's, so on and so forth. Is that what you're saying, that once you've been there and you've sort of peeled back that layer, you can't unsee it?
I do believe that it actually does heighten the senses. It really does. You talk a lot of people who are looking into this phenomena, who have had experiences, Shane, and all of a sudden, everywhere they look, there is something weird. And it is a lot more pronounced than it was before. You could walk through your own house, never have a ghost in there before, and all of a sudden you see a spirit walk down your stairs or walk into your bedroom or cooking eggs at the frying pan for breakfast, because nobody eats breakfast for dinner. At least I don't. Okay? So, I mean, you look at all of these different scenarios, and when you deal with real experiencers, they will tell you that you recognize the signs that are going on. I have a friend of mine who lives up in Prince George, British Columbia, who is a lifelong ET contactee. She knows that the minute she sees blue butterflies, that she is going to have an experience. And it doesn't matter whether it's 30 below zero centigrade or whether it's 30 above in the middle of summer. If she sees blue butterflies, she knows. Now, a lot of people will say, well, geez, there's no blue butterflies flying around that northern part of Canada in the middle of winter. But are they really butterflies? That's what she sees. That's what she knows. And then she leads to the encounters that happen following that.
Okay, well, that would make a lot of sense for a lot of people who, I'm not discrediting what you say, but people say who have strokes, they smell toast, and people who hear sounds and then things start to happen, like the sensitivity changes. I guess that would kind of make sense. Is this personal experience, Dave Scott, that you're speaking to this from, or is this from someone else telling you that?
For me, if I were to have a weird experience, I used to have the song by Pink Floyd, "Is There Anybody Out There?" playing in my head. And I could hear it everywhere. Didn't matter. I could turn on my car radio. It would come on the radio. If it was on my iPhone, if I had a mix on my phone, on my iTunes, all of a sudden it would come up. And I'll be like, okay, here we go. And then sure enough, something happens. May not be that day. It may be a day later, a couple days later, but you prepare for it. It's almost like, hey, get prepared. This is what we're going to be doing. Let's go for a ride.
We've got about 60 seconds here, Dave. Can you tell us about that experience, or maybe one example of something that you've gone through?
Oh, you're opening up a topic. I woke up on the table one day.
Really? I woke up in another city one day, but I don't think it was for the same reason.
I woke up on a table. True story. I woke up on a table one day, and it was a steel table. There was lights over my left shoulder. I looked over my left shoulder, and there were three little gray guys right there.
Oh, I thought maybe like you woke up on the coffee table one morning after something had happened.
That's Vegas, not aliens. Vegas.
Really, hey?
Yeah.
So this to me sounds like a great opportunity for us to hook to next week. So can you dig into that experience? Because you speak of this very, very personally.
Yeah.
And I want everyone to be able to to be able to understand where you're coming from, because you do.
Sure.
I mean, like, you speak about things, right, with passion. And I think it would be a great opportunity to be able to share that story. What do you say?
It's a face for radio, man. I can do it.
All right. Dave Scott, spacedoutradio.com is where you can find all of the things, Dave, and listen to his podcast and his shows online and all that. Dave, thank you very much for the authentic share, buddy. I think that was amazing. Thank you.
No worries, Shane. We'll talk to you next week. Thank you so much. And on my end, we are going to go straight to the news. Oh, there we go. And this is how it ends. Gotta love that bumblefoot, eh? The news is always changing, which is why we bring you the SOR News Wire at the back end of every show, where we get to the weird, the strange, the wacky, and sometimes the polar. Churchill, Manitoba, along the frosty coast roads of Hudson Bay, hundreds of polar bears have been wandering for weeks, waiting for their wintertime sea ice to form so they can return to their hunting and their favorite meal, ringed seals. Until then, they represent a danger to the 900 people living nearby Churchill. Literally no roads in that town. No roads. You know what they're famous for, besides polar bears? To be honest, they had an 8-mile runway just in case the space shuttle needed a place to land. Yeah, right in the middle of nowhere. Well, anyways, polar bear time. The town is working on a plan to prevent conflicts between the hungry bears and humans using a new radar system that can watch and warn when a bear approaches, and to do so in a snowstorm during the dead of night. The radar can see through all of that, said Jeff York, Senior Conservation Director at Polar Bears International, who has been training the system's artificial intelligence this year to recognize bears on the tundra near Churchill. It's one more way to keep the community or camp safe. Next year, the system will be deployed for the first time at a tourist campsite near Longyearbyen, a former coal mining town on Norway's Svalbard archipelago, where a Dutchman was recently killed by a polar bear this past August. Yeah, polar bears are nasty. They're like 2,000 pounds, and they're always angry. They're so cute, yet they're always angry. I'd still like to see one, though. A 2-inch long spider, thought to be extinct in Great Britain, is actually alive and thriving on a British military base. A program manager at the Surrey Wildlife Trust rediscovered the great fox spider on an undeveloped portion of a military installation in Surrey, England, after a 2-year search. The last time the spider was seen before this in Britain was 1993, 27 years ago. It's a gorgeous spider if you're into that kind of thing, said the program manager, Mike Waite. The great fox spider is a wolf spider, a family of arachnids that hunts down its prey rather than building webs. The spider is nocturnal, which makes it an elusive quarry for spider enthusiasts. Waite used aerial photography of the military installation to find a bear patches where the spiders like to hunt. His search in these sandy spots paid off after many fruitless nights. As soon as my torch fell on it, I knew what it was. I was elated. With coronavirus, there have been lots of ups and downs this year, and I also turned 60, so it was a good way to celebrate this. Waite found several male spiders, one female, and possibly some immature spiderlings, though the latter were difficult to identify conclusively. The adult spiders have gray and brown fur bodies. They can spin silk, but instead of making webs, they use that silk line in their burrows so that they can dig in in order to hibernate through the winter. You know what? I love it when species come back, when we're able to find them. It just seems so right, doesn't it? Thought of the Dave happens every night at this time, where we ask a question on our Facebook and Twitter pages, then read your responses on the air, because we love the audience participation around here. Today's Thought of the Dave is as follows. Prove me wrong. Aliens are already here and not a threat, like certain agencies are claiming. Haunted History BC. Totally agree, Dave. Think they've been here since the time of Egypt, maybe before. We assume others are a threat because this is how many human beings react due to fear of anything unknown. Paper Crane wishes. I couldn't agree more. Lloyd, How can we tell if we see one? Dominic, consider the vastness of space. Now consider people. Now go have some exotic herb. Oh, you bad guy. Marty, one of our favorite veterans. I believe they have been here for a very long time, like before recorded human history. As far as being a threat or not, depends on what you consider being a threat. Anal probing may be a threat to one person and a lifestyle decision by another. Very true, Marty. Very true. I think we got time for one or two more. Danny, I wish I could prove it, but I feel the same way. They have been here since the dawn of our time. Christine, I'm here, so it must be true. You look pretty human to me, Christine. Debbie, they are here and here to help. Reverend Keith, first as a holder of the burden, the one who makes a claim typically has a burden of proof to justify or substantiate the claim, especially when it challenges a perceived reality. Thank you, Reverend. Thank you to everybody on the Thought of the Dave. We'll do it all again tomorrow on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you to Captain Shirk for the news and to Dr. Bruce Maccabee for the great show. We got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot Thal rocking in the background with Little Brother is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. Get your horns up for the guitar god himself. Special thanks to everybody listening in at home, at work, in your cars, wherever you may be. Thank you to everyone participating in our chat rooms on LGAP, YouTube, Spreaker, Rev Radio, Facebook, and on Twitter at #SpacedOutRadio. Remember, this show is copyright by Spaced Out Radio and SOR Media Ventures Limited. Thank you so much for choosing to share your evening with us, because together, my friends, say it with me, we own the night. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. Yes, the Woo train has docked for the night. But tomorrow, my friends, we shall ride again. Your seats are always available. Your tickets never expire. And if you want to bring a friend, we got room for them too. One other thing, make sure to thank a veteran, because they deserve it for our freedom. Good night.